This video is kindly sponsored by CuriosityStream, the subscription streaming service that offers thousands of documentaries and non-fiction titles from some of the world's best filmmakers. Hey, 42 here. Here's a random interesting fact for you. A little over 100 years ago, it was widely believed that sharks were completely harmless to humans. It was thought they were practically incapable of biting people, and that even if they did, the resultant damage would be minimal. No broken bones, no severed limbs, just a few puncture marks and a bit of blood. Nothing a plaster couldn't fix, basically. Fast forward to today, and as you've probably noticed, most people are absolutely terrified of sharks. Fatal shark attacks routinely make international news, and sharks like the great white are consistently rated amongst the most feared animals on the planet in polls and surveys. Sharks have also played the villains in plenty of Hollywood blockbusters, most notably Steven Spielberg's Jaws. So what exactly changed in the last 100 years that turned sharks from harmless critters into bloodthirsty man-eaters in the public consciousness? It's safe to say the sharks themselves aren't doing anything differently. They've been around in one form or another for about 450 million years. To put that insane number into perspective, sharks evolved before trees. And the reason we underestimated these fearsome creatures for so long is actually pretty simple. We hadn't had the chance to spend much time with them. The kind of beach culture that we know and love today didn't really get going in earnest until the middle of the 19th century. And surfing, a sport often associated with shark attacks, didn't become popular in the West until the start of the 20th century. So, more people in the water over the years inevitably meant more encounters with sharks. But there's a bit more to it than that. Because the change in public opinion that saw sharks shift from harmless to horrific was by no means gradual. In fact, it can be traced back to a single 2-week period in the summer of 1916. This is the genuinely disturbing story of the Jersey man-eater and the 12 days of terror that changed our relationship with sharks forever. Now, CuriosityStream is the world's first streaming service addressing our lifelong quest to learn, explore, and understand. If you're into history like me, then you need to check out their content-packed history selection. But history is only a small part of their enormous collection. With content spanning from science, nature, history, technology, society, and lifestyle, it really is the new Netflix for nerds. It's Hulu for history buffs, and the Disney Plus for the scientist in all of us. And what's more, it offers thousands of documentaries and non-fiction titles from some of the world's best filmmakers, including exclusive originals, and they're adding more exciting new content all the time. I've been particularly enjoying watching Engineering the Future. It's a fascinating look behind the scenes at the mega building projects that humankind are undergoing to propel our planet into the future. It's interesting to hear about the challenges with construction on such an epic scale and how they're overcome. So if you're anything like me and you want to take more away from the programs you're watching, then go to curiositystream.com/42 for unlimited access to the world's top documentaries and non-fiction series. And for my lovely viewers, you can use promo code 42 and you'll save 25% off, which comes out to only $14.99 a year. That's just $125 per month. So click the link in the description below or go to curiositystream.com/42 and save 25% right now. Did I mention that's only $14.99 for the whole year, which is an unbelievable price for such an incredible wealth of content? Don't miss out. The first attack came in the middle of a sweltering summer's day near the town of Beach Haven, a name that was about to gain a certain sick irony. The victim, 28-year-old Charles Vansant, had decided to take a refreshing pre-dinner swim in the ocean when he felt something rough brush up against his leg, and then pain. Excruciating, reality-rending pain. Onlookers on the shore saw Charles shouting and waving his arms, but not a single person rushed to his aid. Not that this apparent callousness had anything to do with fear or cowardice. These days, if you see a man in the ocean screaming and flailing his arms, your internal shark alarm starts blaring madly, and you do one of two things. If you're the hero type, you rush towards the guy and try to help. And if you're everyone else, you swim for the safety of dry land as fast as your panicky breaststroke can propel you. But in 1916, nobody had any idea that sharks might pose a threat to humans. And so without that context, a man shouting and flailing his arms in the ocean was probably just horsing around. Still, there's only so long you can watch a man screaming in mortal terror as he's ripped apart by a shark before you realise it probably isn't a joke, and eventually local lifeguards went to investigate. Charles was pulled from the water in a bad state, but for reasons that aren't entirely clear, he was taken to a hotel rather than a hospital. He bled out on the front desk. In doing so, he became the first and only confirmed victim of a fatal shark attack in US coastal waters in history. Not that he was going to have to wait long for company. Scientists were so confident in their belief that sharks weren't dangerous to humans at all that in the days after the attack, they remained unconvinced that a shark was really to blame. Several other creative theories were put forward instead, including that Charles had been attacked by a family of angry sea turtles. Because of this skepticism, no beaches in the area were closed in the aftermath of Charles's death, and vacationers continued to swim in the sea off the New Jersey coast as if nothing had happened. That changed 5 days later when the shark came back for more. In what was probably a coincidence, but possibly an indication that the shark had a name fetish, the second victim was another Charles Bruder, a 27-year-old bellhop who worked in a local hotel. This attack took place about 45 miles north of Beach Haven in a town called Spring Lake, another name that was soon to take on a different meaning, because spring a leak is exactly what Charles Bruder did. He was swimming 120 meters offshore when the shark bit him in the abdomen. The power behind the attack was astonishing, literally cutting Charles in half, his legs torn free from his body. There was so much blood in the water that the woman who reported the incident to lifeguards thought she'd seen a red canoe capsizing. Unsurprisingly, Charles Bruder was dead before he reached the shore. And it was here that scientists, so sure of themselves after the first attack, began to do a little bit of soul searching. No doubt a sea turtle can give you a nasty bite, but it's hard to imagine one could tear your legs off, no matter how many times you call it a stupid water tortoise. Charles's death appeared on the front page of the New York Times, and both scientists and locals alike began to take this new fishy threat far more seriously, with beaches along the New Jersey coast emptying and vacationers heading home early. But this is where things started to get a little bit weird, because it turned out that staying out of the ocean wasn't enough to keep people safe from the shark that was now being called the Jersey Man-Eater. You see, as crazy as it may sound, the next two victims weren't killed in the chilly waters of the Atlantic Ocean, but 11 miles inland. Don't worry, this wasn't a Sharknado situation. The next attack took place in Matawan Creek, a tidal inlet in Raritan Bay, where a group of local kids were swimming in the sunshine when one of them spotted an old log floating in the water nearby. He pointed it out to his friends, and they swam towards it to investigate, but as they got closer, they realized something odd. The log was coming towards them, fast. The children panicked and swam for the shore. Most of them made it, but 11-year-old Lester Stillwell was bitten in the leg and dragged beneath the murky water of the creek. When he didn't resurface, the remaining children ran into town screaming for help. Despite the recent attacks, the locals didn't believe for a minute that Lester had been killed by a shark. That might sound naive, but there was some reason for doubt this time. First and foremost, sharks were, unsurprisingly, not exactly a common occurrence in the usually fresh water of Matawan Creek. On top of that, Lester was epileptic. The townspeople suspected he'd had a seizure and that the other children had mistaken his thrashing for a shark attack. Confident in this hypothesis, several men ran to the creek and dived right in to search for the missing boy. It was 24-year-old Watson Fisher who found Lester's lifeless body. But as he returned to the shore, carrying Lester in his arms, the shark struck again, biting Watson in the thigh. He was badly injured and later died in hospital. In the space of just 12 days, the Jersey man-eater had killed 4 people. It almost claimed a 5th victim, half an hour after killing Lester and Watson, when it took a bite out of 14-year-old Joseph Dunn's leg. But Joseph was able to escape when his brother and a friend dragged him to safety. With fatal attacks seemingly coming every few days and eyewitness accounts stacking up, the initial skepticism as to whether a shark was to blame for all this carnage evaporated, to be replaced with what can only be described as mass hysteria. In under 2 weeks, sharks seem to have evolved from harmless ocean dwellers to indiscriminate killers that could strike anywhere there was water. The response to the attacks was huge. Every major news outlet in the US picked up on the story, and patrol boats packed with armed men were dispatched up and down the New Jersey coast. The governor of New Jersey began offering bounties to be paid on delivery of dead sharks, encouraging hundreds, perhaps thousands of people to take their boats to hunt the man-eater. Many more headed to Matawan Creek, where people lined the shores armed with rifles, nets, and in some cases, dynamite. Only in America. The panic even reached the White House, with President Woodrow Wilson scheduling a cabinet meeting to discuss the escalating situation. Some historians have suggested that the search for the Jersey man-eater may just have been the largest animal hunt in history. In the end, it was a man by the name of Michael Schlieser that caught the creature. History doesn't tell us much about Michael, other than the fact he had a rather intriguing double profession. Taxidermist by day, lion tamer by night. That's a CV you don't see too often. Michael claimed to have almost lost his life whilst catching the Jersey man-eater, which turned out to have been a juvenile great white shark. Apparently, the creature had almost sunk Michael's boat before he was able to kill it by repeatedly smashing it over the head with a broken oar. Once back on dry land, the shark's belly was opened, and about 7 kilograms of what was identified as human flesh was found inside. Mercifully, the attacks abruptly stopped, but whilst the immediate threat seemed to be over, it's safe to say the Jersey man-eater's fearsome teeth had left indelible indentations in the American psyche. Swimming in the ocean would never quite feel the same again. The funny thing is, as brutal and terrifying as the events of 1916 were, sharks are wholly undeserving of this reputation that they now have as a result. Because in reality, sharks pose very little threat to humans. For starters, of the close to 500 species currently known to science, just 3 are on record as having been responsible for more than 10 human fatalities: the bull shark, the tiger shark, and of course, the great white. Though there probably should be another species on that list, the Oceanic Whitetip. There have long been rumors of shark feeding frenzies taking place after disasters at sea. The sinking of the USS Indianapolis, an incident that's been mentioned in Jaws, is probably the most famous example. Oceanic whitetips are thought to be the species responsible in almost all of those cases. But since there's normally nobody around to witness them, we don't have any good data on how many victims have been claimed by them. But even if we do add the Oceanic whitetip to the list of sharks with over 10 human kills under their lateral lines, that still means over 99% of shark species are pretty much entirely harmless to humans. And if you do actually look at the numbers, even the 4 so-called dangerous species have only been responsible for a tiny number of human fatalities in the grand scheme of things. On average, around 4 people die from shark bites each year globally, which means practically any animal that's even remotely dangerous is far more likely to kill you than a shark. That includes the obvious ones like snakes, spiders, lions, and crocodiles, but it also includes deer, cows, horses, dogs, hippos, elephants, and ants. You're over 100,000 times more likely to be killed by humanity's deadliest foe, other humans, than you are to be killed by a shark. Now, I know what you're thinking. These numbers are skewed by the fact most of us never go anywhere near sharks, and that's partly true. But even if you happen to be swimming or surfing near the shore, i.e. the single place on Earth where you're most likely to be bitten by a shark, you're still far more likely to die from drowning or a heart attack than you are from a shark bite. It's true that shark attacks are on the rise in many parts of the world, but again, that's nothing to do with the sharks. We're just spending more time in the water. And as the world's population continues to grow and hotter temperatures tempt more people to cool off in the sea, we can expect that trend to continue. But hey, if sunbathing naked in the Serengeti suddenly became popular, we'd probably see more fatal lion attacks too. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that sharks aren't dangerous. Clearly they are. It's just that they aren't nearly such a threat to humans as they're usually portrayed to be. Of the hundreds of millions of people who swim in the sea every year, only a handful end up as shark food. And the irony is, sharks have far more reason to fear us than we do to fear them. After all, we kill about 100 million of them every single year. At the current rate, it would take the collective efforts of shark kind about 25 million years to kill that many humans. But this barrage of statistics actually raises a kind of interesting question. If all of this is true, and sharks just have a bad reputation, what the hell happened in 1916? If an average of 4 people are killed by sharks worldwide today, when more people are spending more time swimming in the ocean, how could 4 people have been killed by a single shark in New Jersey at a time when shark attacks were practically unheard of? Well, there's a fairly short answer to that question. We have absolutely no idea. The 1916 shark attacks continue to baffle scientists to this day. The pattern, frequency, and distribution of the encounters are so unusual as to be unique. We've quite literally never seen anything else like them anywhere in the world in the more than 100 years since they took place. At the time, it was believed that a so-called rogue shark was behind the attacks. That is, a shark that got a taste for human flesh and decided to try and single-handedly wipe out our entire species. And that theory certainly fits the evidence. The attacks took place in a neat line from south to north, suggesting a single animal cruising up the coast. But there's one small problem with this theory. So far as we know, rogue sharks don't exist. In all of recorded history, you can count on one hand the number of times a single shark is known to have attacked multiple people. In fact, putting the events of 1916 to one side for a second, you can count that number of times a single shark is known to have attacked multiple people on one finger. It happened in Egypt in 2010. That's it. And even then, the incidents happened in the same location within minutes of each other, resulting in just 1 death and 4 injuries. Very different to 1916. When you take our own fears out of the equation, sharks are animals like any other. They eat things because that's how they stay alive. Compared to plenty of other animals commonly found in the ocean, human beings are a fairly terrible food source for large sharks. We're bony, not particularly calorie-dense, and have an annoying habit of fighting back. It simply doesn't make sense that a shark would suddenly decide to become a strict humanitarian. It would be like you deciding that from now on, you're only going to eat twigs. Although the way things are going, I'll give it about 5 years until that's actually a thing. Great white sharks hunt by swimming around looking for prey on the surface. When they find it, they put on an incredible burst of speed and crash into their dinner like a torpedo hitting a ship, often breaching the surface of the water spectacularly in the process. We don't typically see that behavior when sharks bite humans, because for the most part, these incidents don't come about as a result of predatory behavior. Sharks are basically like toddlers. They use their mouths to explore the world around them. When they come across an object they aren't familiar with, they give it a bit of a nibble to see what it is. The problem is, when it's a 6-meter, 2,000-kilogram great white shark doing the nibbling, it's usually enough to cut a human being in half. Okay, so rogue sharks aren't a thing, and the majority of so-called shark attacks are basically just sharks being inquisitive and making a mess in the process. But if it wasn't a rogue shark that killed 4 people and maimed another in 1916, what was it? One theory is that the Jersey man-eater never really existed, and that instead, several different sharks were responsible. The frequency and south to north pattern of the attacks certainly fit the idea of a single shark, but it's possible that was just a coincidence. Backing this theory up is the fact that great white sharks, like the one caught with a belly full of human flesh in 1916 by taxidermist cum lion tamer Michael Schleiser, can't survive for long in fresh water. Bull sharks, on the other hand, can, leading some people to believe that it was a bull shark that killed Lester Stilwell and Watson Fisher. Though I should point out that Matawan Creek is tidal, meaning the water there is often brackish, even quite far inland, so we can't rule out a great white entirely. Whatever it was that really happened in New Jersey in 1916, there's no denying it had a monumental impact on the way we see sharks. Even today, when the weight of evidence and statistics tells us that sharks are the least of humanity's many concerns, they're still widely misunderstood by the public and misrepresented by the media. Maybe it's time we changed that. Thanks for watching.